If you want to take CRP out, there are a few things that you need to do in order to raise a great crop, not just for next year, but for the next 10 to 20 years.
Well, Brian, when I think about CRP, I think about all the residue that's out there, and a lot of guys say, wow, I've got all this residue. I need to either A, burn it, B, mow it down, C, maybe mow it down and till it up and do some heavy deep tillage. I mean, all those things are like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, we just spent 10 years, 15 years, 20 years building up this soil.
Okay,
and
but
right away we're gonna get rid of all this organic matter.
No, that you just said residue. Now there's a whole big difference between organic material on top of the ground and organic matter that's already decomposed below the ground. Tillage is what's going to destroy that organic matter below the ground, so we want to do as little tillage as possible. As far as organic material above ground, we don't want to burn that because then we're going to have more chance for erosion. We're going to lose some nutrients with the burning. We really don't want to burn. If you have to do a little bit of light tillage, that's one thing, okay? Just a little bit of light tillage, maybe for some gopher holes or other rodents that have been out there, but we would really discourage you from doing major tillage on that ground that's going to come out of CRP because we don't want to destroy organic matter and we really don't want to lose all of our organic material on top of the ground either.
Well, here's one other reason that guys look at doing some tillage out there, because we've got some tough perennial weeds. When we're talking about CRP in ground that's been idle really for a few years now, there's going to be perennial weeds out there taking over.
And that's easy. That's easy. So here's what you need to do on this CRP thing. The day that you can get out there, whenever your contract actually expires, you get out there that day and spray the highest labeled rate of Roundup that you possibly can. Then next spring, you hit it with another very strong shot of Roundup before you've even planted. You want to get this CRP burned down this fall, you want to burn it down again next spring, and then those perennial weeds, Darren, they're just not a problem.
Well, one of the good things about Roundup is you don't have to worry about carryover into the next crop. However, many of the products you may have used in CRP over the years could be in that category. Things like Tordon or Milestone or Ally or Cimarron. Those types of products can hang around for more than 1 year and lead to issues, especially with broadleaf crops you may come back into.
Okay, let's talk about what crop you do want to plant out there. If you haven't used one of those harmful products to broadleaf crops, ideally I'd like to put soybeans in the first year for a couple of reasons. Number one, we can use higher rates of Roundup in soybeans than we can in corn. So if some of those perennial weeds, or especially perennial grasses that were out there during all those years of CRP, are still left, we can hit them with a good strong rate of Roundup even after those soybeans are up. The other big reason why I like to use soybeans instead of corn, for example, is because you're going to have a lot of tie-up of nitrogen the first couple of years coming out of CRP, because there's so much organic material that has yet to break down and become organic matter. It requires a lot of nitrogen, and obviously soybeans can produce their own nitrogen. Corn can't. So if you want to plant corn, I would suggest probably putting an extra 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen out there. In a corn on corn situation, we usually say 50 extra pounds of nitrogen. With corn into CRP, I'd say an extra 100 pounds beyond what you would normally do. So let's say you're going for 200 bushel corn, you figure, oh, a couple hundred pounds of nitrogen, I'd put 300 pounds on if it was me. Now that doesn't necessarily mean all in one shot, it might mean split applying it, but somehow, some way during the course of the season, I'd try to get 300 pounds out there.
The residue on top of the soil is very high in carbon and low in nitrogen. And the bacteria that are going to break that down need that carbon to nitrogen ratio in balance. They need about 12 parts of carbon to 1 part of nitrogen. And when they get that situation where they've got this high carbon residue, maybe it's 30 to 1 or 60 to 1. Well, they need a lot of nitrogen to try and break all that down. So either hide your nitrogen down deep where only your roots are going to get it, or as Brian mentioned, just add a little bit more to the equation. You're not going to waste it. You're not going to lose it. I mean, you have to do it within reason, but you are going to get it tied up with that residue as that residue starts breaking down, which is ultimately going to be a good thing for your crop because it's going to release those nutrients to the next plants that are growing in the field.
Well, one of the most important things we want you to understand too is this CRP ground, in a lot of cases, is actually really good ground. And now that you've had it in CRP for quite a number of years, you've built up the organic matter. You've now actually built new soil because you've reduced the erosion so dramatically and had crop, we'll call it crop growing on there for quite a number of years, whether it was grass or a legume or something. Anyway, you can raise great crops on there now compared to before you put it into CRP. We just want to make sure that you're not destroying that soil with tillage and we also want to make sure that you get off to a good start by controlling any of that CRP, any weeds, anything right away this fall. Control it again next spring. And if you are planting a grass crop like corn or wheat, make sure you're putting extra nitrogen on, because you are going to have a fair amount of tie-up because of the high carbon to nitrogen ratio.
Well, we're going to get into soil sampling here a little bit later in the show, and that'll certainly apply to this ground coming out of CRP. But first of all, we've got to deal with the weeds like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?